Close the bathroom door. Lock it. Sit there for a second, alone, and let the silence settle around you. That feeling is newer than you think. Newer than agriculture. Newer than cities. Newer, in fact, than almost all of human history. For most of the time humans have existed, that door didn't exist. Neither did the wall around it. So what did people do when they needed to be alone? The answer is stranger than silence. They didn't need to be alone. Not in the way you do. Your brain evolved inside a crowd, a loud, tangled, constantly touching crowd, sleeping bodies pressed against other sleeping bodies. Children passed from arm to arm, meals eaten shoulder to shoulder around a single fire that lit every face in the group at once. There was no bedroom door. There was no diary with a lock. There was, in most cases, no version of alone that you would recognize. And yet, somehow, humans built entire civilizations without ever needing what you now consider basic. Why? Start with the fire. For hundreds of thousands of years, fire was the center of everything. Not just warmth, not just cooking. Fire was the boundary between the group and the dark, and everyone stayed inside that boundary, together, every single night. Anthropologist Polly Risner spent years recording conversations among the Juhuanzi people of the Kalahari, comparing daytime talk to nighttime talk around the fire. During the day, conversation was practical. Complaints, coordination, gossip. But at night, the talk turned to stories, myths, jokes, songs about distant relatives. The fire didn't just provide warmth, it gathered people into a single circle of light and made privacy almost physically impossible. And that was the point. Firelight has a range. Past a certain distance, you vanish into the dark, and the dark was never safe. So the group stayed close, visible to each other, audible to each other, for hours every night. No one whispered a secret into a phone. The only entertainment was each other, and even sleep happened in a pile of bodies, not behind a door. You might assume this sounds suffocating. Constant noise, constant witnesses, never a moment to just think. But suffocating is a modern judgment. It assumes privacy is a need. For most of human history, it wasn't. It was a threat. Here is the part that reframes everything. Being alone, for early humans, usually meant one thing: danger. A person who wandered off from the group at night was a person without eyes watching their back, without ears that could hear a predator before they did. Solitude wasn't peaceful. It was often the last thing you experienced before you didn't experience anything at all. Researcher Kim Hill, who spent decades living alongside the ache foragers of Paraguay, documented just how rarely people in small-scale societies were ever truly by themselves. Hill's long-term data on foraging bands showed daily life running almost entirely in groups, and being physically separated from the band for any real length of time correlated with a sharp rise in danger and mortality. The tribe wasn't just social, it was the thing standing between you and death. So your ancestors didn't crave privacy. They avoided isolation, because isolation could kill them. This changes the entire question. It's not why didn't they have privacy, it's why would they ever want it. Even sleep reveals how different their world was. Sleeping arrangements weren't private rooms, but shared spaces. Children curled against parents, unrelated adults only a few feet away. Grief wasn't private. Illness wasn't private. Falling in love wasn't private. Every major event of a life happened in front of an audience that never left, because that audience was also your food supply, your protection, and your only chance of surviving to have children of your own. Now think about your own body for a second. Think about how your gut tightens in an empty parking lot at night. That unease isn't random. It's inherited. Your brain still runs an ancient program that treats aloneness, especially in the dark, as a warning sign, not a comfort. Which is strange, considering how much modern life pushes you toward exactly that state. You have your own room, maybe your own apartment, doors that lock, a phone you can disappear into without another human ever knowing what you're thinking. By almost every historical standard, you are living the most private existence a human has ever lived. And yet, loneliness researcher Robin Dunbar, famous for identifying the cognitive limit on how many stable relationships a human brain can maintain, roughly 150, has pointed to something unsettling in modern data. As physical privacy increased across the last century, so did reported loneliness. Not because people wanted less connection. because the daily, physical closeness humans evolved inside quietly disappeared, replaced by walls, screens, and doors that could be shut. You gained privacy. You lost the constant proof that you were not alone. That's the trade nobody explicitly agreed to. It happened slowly, as farming replaced foraging, as houses replaced open fires, as bedrooms replaced shared floors. Each step felt like progress, because in almost every practical sense, it was. Fewer strangers seeing your worst moments. The birth of something we now call dignity, autonomy, personal space. But biology moves far slower than culture. Your circumstances changed in a handful of generations. Your nervous system did not. Consider punishment for a moment. In many small-scale societies, the harshest response to wrongdoing wasn't violence. It was exile. Send someone away from the group, and the wilderness would do the rest. Compare that to solitary confinement, widely considered one of the most severe punishments a modern prison can inflict, with psychologists documenting the toll it takes on the mind within days. The method is different. The logic is exactly the same. Removing a human from the group has always been one of the most damaging things you can do to them. And living in full view had a cost, too. Your mistakes were also in full view. There was no closing a door and processing an argument alone first. You dealt with each other because there was nowhere else to go. Modern life solved that problem almost by accident. Walls gave you the ability to fail privately. Cities gave you the freedom of being surrounded by strangers who will never learn your name. For the first time in the history of the species, you can be around no one and still survive perfectly well until tomorrow. But it also explains something else. Why open-plan offices, designed to maximize interaction, often make people feel more isolated instead of less. Why some of the most connected people on the planet, with hundreds of contacts and a phone that never stops buzzing, still describe themselves as achingly alone. The number of contacts in your phone was never the thing your brain evolved to track. Physical, reliable, daily closeness was. Ancient humans had almost none of your privacy, and in exchange, they had something you rarely get anymore. Undivided, constant, physical proof that people were near, that someone would notice if you didn't wake up, that someone would hear you if you cried out. You have privacy now, personal space that would have seemed almost impossible to someone living 10,000 years ago. To them, a person who chose to sleep alone wasn't independent. They were unprotected, possibly even punished or cast out. To you, that same isolation is a luxury you pay rent for. Neither version is wrong. They're just answers to two very different questions. Ancient humans were asking, how do I survive the night? You are asking, how do I get 5 minutes of peace? The fact that those questions have opposite answers tells you how far and how fast your environment has changed. But somewhere underneath all of that privacy, your brain is still the same brain that once slept surrounded by other bodies, lit by the same fire, safe only because it was never, ever alone. So close the door if you want to. Lock it if it makes you feel better. Just don't be surprised if some deeper, older part of you still isn't entirely sure that's a good idea.